Welcome to the 10th episode in my Pharmacist Podcasters Series. If you are new to this series, thank you so much for joining us today. My guests and I talk about podcasting to inspire you to start your own podcast, be a podcast guest, or just use your voice in general. If you are interested in podcasting, podcasting, or public speaking, you need to listen to this episode. You're listening to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. I'm your host, Ohio pharmacist Kim Newlove. My guest today is Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh. Rachel is the host of the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. Links to her podcast, her website, her LinkedIn profile, and more are in the show notes on thepharmacistvoice.com. And if you need help starting a podcast, I can help. I know what it's like to be at the beginning of that process and not know the first step. I have two podcasts. You're listening to the first one now, and my other one is a small local podcast, which you can find at perrysburgpodcast.com. I teach Podcasting 101 classes local to me here in Perrysburg, Ohio, and I enjoy helping other pharmacy professionals start podcasts too. We just work online instead of in person. If you are interested, head over to kimnewlove.com/podcasting, and there you can access my free ebook and audiobook about podcasting. You can buy my self-paced online course about podcasting, or you can book time with me and work one-on-one with me so I can coach you privately. Again, that can be online, or if you're here in Ohio, come on over. I can work with you in person. Listen, 2025 could be your year. Start planning your podcast today. Next, I will tell you a little bit more about my guest, Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh, and her podcast, and then we'll roll the interview. What I'm going to do today is instead of reading her bio, I'm going to read the podcast description from the Apple Podcasts app. Then you can hear about both Rachel and the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. Here we go. Ever wish you had a seasoned real estate mentor whispering success secrets in your ear? That's exactly what you'll get when you tune into the acclaimed The Luxury Rental Doctor Show with your host, Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh. From inner city Miami to luxury Airbnb investor, this retired pharmacist, best-selling author, and Netflix featured personality brings you insights that transform challenges into profitable opportunities. Her specialty? Breaking down her journey and strategies into actionable steps designed to maximize your investment returns with minimal properties. Tune in, get inspired, and get ready to discover why countless medical professionals and entrepreneurs turn to Dr. Rachel for guidance when it comes to luxury short-term and mid-term rentals. Whether you're a healthcare worker seeking financial freedom, a mom balancing life and investments, or a professional aiming to retire early, each episode is crafted to help you take immediate action on the most effective strategies for building your own profitable rental portfolio today. Join Dr. Rachel and learn how to leverage real estate for a life of less stress and more success. That ends the Apple Podcasts description for the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. Before I roll the interview, I just want to invite you to listen until the very end of our interview for a bonus. If you are a podcaster or a podcaster to be, you will want to hear what Dr. Rachel has to say. She shares tips and tricks for getting the word out about her podcast. It just might give you ideas for advertising your podcast. She sure gave me some ideas. So stay tuned after Rachel and I say goodbye to hear that bonus. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh. Hi, Dr. Rachel. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here with you today.
This is going to be fun. I love talking to pharmacist podcasters, and we've got a woman pharmacist podcaster on the show today with me. I am so excited. Yay. Now, how do people address you? You are no longer in clinical practice, so how do people generally address you?
Either Dr. Rachel or just Rachel. I think Rachel's just fine.
Well, Rachel, let's talk about your podcast. How did you go about naming your podcast the Luxury Rental Doctor Podcast?
I love that you're asking that question because I think that's one of the things that I struggle with. It is definitely a mouthful. And from the perspective of listening to marketers and experts and getting the little seed planted in my head that, oh, it has to be SEO optimized, like search engine optimization. So I threw as many words into the title as possible. But now I think I'm struggling with it a little bit, Kim, if I'm going to be fully transparent. He said I could be transparent on this podcast and vulnerable. So I came about that name just based on what I was doing in day-to-day life. I invested in real estate. I shared with my other pharmacists, dentists, physician friends on how to do the same. I niched into a little bit more of the luxury realm. And don't get it twisted, luxury does not have to be expensive. It's all about a luxury experience. And so I cobbled together those words, luxury rental doctor podcast. And so, yeah, I'm questioning everything now. Over the last couple of years, I'm like, that is a long name. And yeah. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you for sharing that. We're trying to inspire other pharmacists to start a podcast too. And even though you're not in clinical
Yeah,
practice anymore, you are still a doctor of pharmacy, right?
that's right.
Yeah, you earned that degree. So you might as well stick that doctor right there in the podcast. And I think it kind of creates an identity. Like the people that you are working with might be doctors too, and they might feel like, hey, she's one of
Yes.
us. I'm going to listen to her, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can tell.
absolutely.
There's a method to the madness.
100%. And that was the mindset because we get a lot of resources and advice that's out there, whether it's resource or advice to create a podcast or to invest in real estate. And sometimes it's not really in alignment with our reality, right? And so I was sharing a little bit in the green room earlier that when I speak with other podcasters, I say, I'm trying to, do a little bit or get a little bit more enhanced reach. And they say, just go ahead and post 4 or 5 podcasts per week. I'm like, okay, I have a whole husband. I have 2 kids and 3 dogs. There's no way I have the capacity to do more than I actually can do. And just making sure that I'm committed to publishing 1 episode per week that is as best of the quality as I can possibly put out there. That's my bandwidth right now. And so that's the thought process that I really think I took into consideration with launching this particular podcast, because what we teach, it's not for everyone. It's specifically for those who are in alignment with what we're in alignment with, our struggles, right? A lot of my listeners are women, moms with full-time jobs, clinical roles, and they're super busy. They're in healthcare. And so the angle is going to be different than our fellow bro investors. They're like, let's go and take down 100 properties. Like, no, what if we just did 1? So that's really the inspiration, just providing just different perspective. Not that they're wrong, but for us, it's going to be a different perspective for sure.
I wondered when I saw that, the Luxury Rental Doctor podcast, is she using her own title or is she trying to rope in other people who may also be doctors? So let me ask you, who's your intended audience for the Luxury Rental Doctor podcast?
I'm my intended audience, that doctor mom who was trying to figure out a way to create something on the side without negating everything that I had built. Now, I know you welcomed me to the show saying that I'm no longer in clinical practice, and that is absolutely true. But that was never my intention. I thought that I was going to just have this little side hustle with rentals on the side, and I would stay in clinical practice in perpetuity. And so my target audience is me. I'm that girl who wanted to hear this message, who wanted to learn how to do this in a more simplified way, but yet a granular way where I could look at spreadsheets. I'm a spreadsheets girl. So I think I am my target audience. I was thinking of her, that mom working at CVS with 2 boys. That's who my audience is. And of course, I have been able to attract others who experience some of the same pain points that we experience as well.
I love that you admit you're a data nerd because I am too. I love me some data. I do.
All day.
It helps make decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you take the emotion out of it when you can look at facts and figures. That's just my opinion. I don't like to make emotional decisions. I like to have an
Yes.
emotion about something, but I don't like to straight make it off of an emotion. I would rather see the facts and figures.
100%, 100%. And especially with something as important and as financially risky as real estate, right? We have to take the emotions out of it. We have to look at the numbers if we're looking at it from the perspective of investing. If it's your own home, yes, we can be a little bit emotional, but what we teach in the Luxury Rental Doctor podcast is no. The spreadsheet, I don't even want to see a single photo. Do not bring me a photo because we're going to, oh, look at that little pond. No, no, ma'am. Let's look at the spreadsheet first. And if it passes some filtering tests on the spreadsheet, then I want to see a picture.
I can imagine that some people just absolutely fall in love with a property, just, love at first
Mm-hmm.
sight. So that's got to be a good compliment to that emotion they're having for you to bring in the
Yeah,
facts and the figures and, just think of it objectively.
exactly.
Yeah. I love that you talked about your audience being you, like your former self, really, before you got into the real estate market. So tell me a little bit about how'd you get into real estate? Like, what was the interest there?
What was interesting to me is when I graduated from school, I would say growing up in the inner city of Miami, I was born in Haiti, raised in the inner city of Miami, and financial literacy was never something that we discussed at the dinner table because there weren't a lot of finances to literate upon per se. And so our family kind of struggled financially. We're immigrants from Haiti. And so didn't have a lot of resources to go into pharmacy school. Ended up taking out quite a bit of student loan debt, met my husband in college. We got married. We graduated. He graduated with a psychotherapy degree. I graduated with my PharmD. And that came with $500,000 in student loan debt combined for
Combined
the
for
two
the
of
two
us.
of you?
Yes. Yeah,
Whoa.
indeed. And so we jumped on the Dave Ramsey train, me primarily, again, trying to figure out this financial literacy situation. I really didn't know how to create a budget, how to live frugally. As a matter of fact, as soon as I graduated, I was like, let's buy the house, let's buy the car. So I fell into that trap initially. And then when the student loans became due from being in deferment for a little bit. I think we have a little bit of grace period. But when we saw that bill come due, it was 3 to 5x our monthly mortgage. And I was shook. I was shook to the core. My husband, I remember him having a visceral reaction and just like, oh my gosh. And so started to burn the candle at both ends, working multiple jobs, 5 jobs between the two of us at one point just to pay down some of the student loan debt. I remember seeing a quote from Warren Buffett that said, if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. And I just scoffed at him. I'm like, how dare you? What are you talking about? However, it was that little seed that got planted like, oh, well, I think he's talking about investing. And so I started to research all of the pillars of investing, all of the different asset classes of investing. And at that time, cryptocurrency was like kind of making its debut into the marketplace. And it looked sexy. It was like, wow, this is very interesting, but I didn't quite know what it was. And something that I can credit to Dave Ramsey, not that I'm still a huge Dave Ramsey follower, but he said something and he said to only invest in something that you understand. And so I didn't understand crypto. So I had to cross it off the list, although it's the newest, shiniest object, but I did know real estate. And then I went all in researching the different types of real estate. There's large apartments, there's small apartments, there's houses. And I went all in based off of spreadsheeting it and seeing which category would give us the quickest wins. And it was short-term rentals primarily.
Now, what was your first rental property?
Yeah, so it was actually a property in our own neighborhood. I could walk to it. So it went on the market, and this is after we had experiences a few losses in terms of we had put in bids for properties. We didn't get them. We'd gone to see properties. It was nothing like we were expecting. And so we were about to give up. And I mean it, we're about to give up because we had piled up some cash, about 17, I want to say 17 to 22,000 around that time. We'd piled up some cash to make a big payment on a student loan. And we could do either one or the other. After we had driven to Alabama to see this property, and it was nothing like the photos. It was falling apart, dilapidated in the middle of nowhere. And we said, oh my gosh, these are not the types of deals that we can leverage. We just need to leverage a deal that is a little bit more higher quality in our own backyard. And that's what my thought process was. But to be honest, as we were driving home, my husband was like, nope, this didn't work. I gave you your shot. We're back on plan A. We're going to take our pile of cash and pay down the student loans. That night, a property came on the market on Zillow, right? On Zillow. It was $290,000 in our own backyard. And I know my backyard. That's the thing, Kim. When you have information, you can make amazing decisions. I know my backyard. I knew that property was worth $400,000. I don't care what anyone told me. That property was worth $400,000. We called the realtor first thing in the morning. It was a Sunday. And this was in 2018. We told the realtor, 290, we want to put in an offer. We're not going to ask for any concessions. At that time, people were asking for things like, hey, I want the seller to put a little bit of money into fixing this or into fixing that. And I said, we don't want to fix anything. So we were number 7. We had moved up to number 1 because we said we didn't want anything because there's a lot of meat left on that bone, right? For $290,000 in a really nice neighborhood, I knew we were in great shape. And so that was the first property. We had found a lender, a local credit union, who approved us for like a 5% down. 5% of 290,000 is around what? 15,000 or so. So right in our budget, and we put in an offer and we won the deal. And that's how we started.
Congratulations on that first one. How many different properties did it take you owning or renting to feel comfortable? Like you really had the hang of it and you knew what you were doing?
As far as having the hang of it, based on the strategy of short-term rentals, you're dealing with guests, you're hosting a number of guests. I would say after potentially our 20th turn, we got the hang of it. And that occurred within that first property. However, we grew, we grew. And I truly believe if you're looking for a strategy to kind of cut back a little bit, if you're working 14 hours like I was, if you're looking for a strategy to cut back a little bit, 2 really well-positioned properties in a really good market can get you there. And notice, I say luxury rental doctor show. These aren't million dollar properties. These are probably the worst properties in the best neighborhoods. That's what we go for. But again, not the most dilapidated. We don't want to go into a really large construction project with our busy schedules. But 1 or 2 properties, you start to get the hang of it because we leverage the short-term rental model that is kind of like Airbnb, and a midterm rental model, which is like a 30-day furnished stay. So our properties are furnished.
Thank you for talking about that. When you say Airbnb, I think everybody knows Airbnb. So I think that kind of connects the dots and people understand that. So thank you for saying that. I'm hearing you say you started in 2018. The year is now 2025. So at what point did you start a podcast to talk about short-term rentals?
That's a great question. So we started our podcast in 2020.
Did you feel like you really had the hang of it? You were on fire about it. You were ready to quit your 9-to-5 job for it, and you were going all in. I mean, like, what were you thinking about at the time you started the podcast? Where were you at in your career?
Oh my goodness. That's a great question. And I laugh because I still don't think I have the hang of it. If I'm being honest, it's interesting. And every single podcast episode, I want to get 1% better. And so I think one of the biggest disconnects with us in pharmacy, we want the recipe and we are going to crush it. Podcasting is different, right? It's going to be a little bit more incremental. And the goal is to get 1% better every time. And so right now, I have a great little podcast team that helps me after the episodes are complete, that they could do a little bit of edits and they make sure that it's posted on time. And I even tell them, hey guys, we want to get 1% better. What are we trying to get better at this week? What's our 1% for this week? And so, no, I did not go out. I'm not ruling the world from a podcast perspective. It is a work in progress, but I'm just proud to say I made the commitment. No matter what, one episode is getting published every single week. And so does that mean that I need to have a bench of 3 episodes that are ready to go just in case I get ill or my kids get ill? Yeah, you got to have a little bench if you're thinking that you want to make that kind of commitment. If it's once a month, that's great. If it's once a week, that's great. Your capacity is your capacity. So that's my commitment. Are they perfect every time? No, they're not. But I'm just so grateful to have an audience to listen and to comment and to connect with me at such a great level. And I don't feel like I answered your question, Kim. Can you?
That's all right. This is all good content. Anybody listening to this hoping to start a podcast is probably getting a lot of good little nuggets out of this. For example, you mentioned you have a team, and that's something that people just starting out don't know is an
Yeah.
option. You have both a video podcast and an audio podcast. And by you saying you have a team, that's you admitting that you welcome that support because that may not be your subject matter expertise area. You didn't go into videography, you didn't go into audio engineering. Therefore, you're allowing people to help you. I love that you talked about that. But yes, we should probably get to the question there. I was kind of talking about you started investing in real estate in 2018, and then you started the podcast in
Mhm.
2020. When you started the podcast in 2020, what did you hope to accomplish? Why start a podcast?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for rephrasing that for me. So, what I hope to accomplish was to really give a voice to my own perspective. I had bought into the hype that I needed dozens and dozens of underperforming properties to cobble them together to reach my goal of creating, say, it was like an extra $5,000 a month of cash flow. However, what I found was that wasn't true. I can potentially accomplish that same strategy of cash flow and revenue coming in with just 1 or 2 properties. But Kim, no one was talking about that. No one was talking about that. And I just wanted to just scream it to the high heavens and let others know what I was experiencing. So back in 2020, I was furloughed, legit furloughed. hmm
By CVS.
Actually, I was at another place of work
Okay.
and I was furloughed. I won't say their name.
Okay. Retail or hospital? I'm just curious. What
This
setting?
was actually remote work.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So it was remote work hospital, rural hospital remote work. So I got furloughed and I found myself, and I'm not sure how I stumbled upon this. I found myself on this little app called Clubhouse. Out of all places, I didn't know what it was, but it was pretty cool. And so I just jumped on. I would listen in, particularly in the short-term rental rooms, the Airbnb rooms. And then they would bring people up and I would answer a few questions. And then whenever I would jump right back into Clubhouse, they would automatically bring me up to the stage and give me a little badge of honor saying that, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. And I became like the staple in the room. And I kind of found my voice there. It was weird enough. And so from there, I just started to share. It developed into a Facebook group. I created a little Facebook group and I would just go live on the Facebook group. And to be honest, if you can go back to my early podcasts, it's just my Facebook lives that I repurposed into podcasts.
This is a fun story. I never got on Clubhouse, and I was always wondering what it was like. But it sounds like you got a promotion. So you got furloughed by your employer, but you got promoted by Clubhouse, which is really cool. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting to say the least. There are a lot of people looking for connection, a lot of people feeling kind of lonely too. And so just navigating life, navigating a variety of things. And for those who are in the real estate realm, they're like, well, the guest just said this. I was like, well, here's how you handle it. And here's how, just offering value and offering value. And it became obvious that the questions were the same questions over and over again. And it was like very valuable information. People would come back and say, yeah, I did what you tried and it worked. I was like, this is so cool. Let's create a little community around this. And so that's how it started.
That's awesome. Just to recap, you got on Clubhouse. You kind of got promoted to thought leader on short-term rentals.
Yes.
You started a Facebook group. You recorded the Facebook Lives. Those became the first podcasts, and you have built it up. And may I say, I think that whatever you've got going on today is much more robust than what you had back then, because you've got the YouTube version of the podcast. You've got the audio podcast on all the podcast players. I think the 1% better all the time, you're doing it.
Yeah.
I see it. You've definitely changed so much over the last 5 years. Congrats.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And for the listeners who heard the word, she has a team, I didn't start off that way. I just went live in Facebook and I said, I wonder if I could just repurpose this as a podcast. And that's what I did. I hit record, went live. And I like when I can do one activity and it turns into double duty. Just like when I cook one big meal, I could use it again in a different way. That's a little life hack. And we need to find those for those of us who are super busy.
Thank you for sharing that. I've got to ask, who was your media host when you got started repurposing that Facebook Live content?
That's a great question. And Kim, I don't know what that word means. What's a media host?
Okay, we've got Libsyn, we've got Spotify for podcasters.
Gotcha.
They used to have Anchor, but it became Spotify for creators now, I think is what they call it. There's also Red Circle, I believe, Blueberry.
Yes.
All those. Do any of those names sound familiar?
Okay, so I will tell you, I started off using Kajabi, which I don't know who they use on the back end, but now we use Captivate.
Yes.
Is that
Winner.
the right answer?
Yes.
Is that does that fall in the category?
Yes, Captivate. Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Captivate.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, that one's been recommended to me by some podcaster friends. So if I was starting a podcast again today, I might try that one. I think that there are a lot of really good options out there. It's just kind of, I'm curious how other people get started. And I know what Kajabi is because I have online courses on Kajabi. Would you like to talk briefly, since we're talking about Kajabi? Do you still use Kajabi? And if so, what do you offer on Kajabi?
Yes. So I use Kajabi, but not the podcasting platform. The podcasting platform was a little bit dicey. And so I find that, I don't know if you find this to be true as well, Kim, when one platform decides, you know what, we're going to do everything, they don't often do everything that well. No offense, Kajabi, I love you to pieces. So they're a course creator platform. They do a beautiful job with course creators, where you can house whatever product or service, digital marketing wise, in their platform. And they spin off into all these other things. And I would like to say that it didn't work that great for the podcast side of things. However, they're top tier for the course side of things. And so inside of my concierge coaching program, we have a 90-day version and a 1-year version. And we house that inside of Kajabi. That's where everything lives. It's beautifully created. We've integrated with a whole lot of AI so that our members, if they're searching for something that I taught on, the transcripts are AI indexed. They can just type it in, the videos pop up. So we added a lot of coding to Kajabi. So it's been wonderful. So that's what we offer in Kajabi.
Awesome. And what is the nature of the course?
So it's called the Luxury Rental Academy. And so I help busy, burnt out professionals achieve 1 to 2 properties in 90 days. And that is coming from, I have no idea where to invest. So our first step is to first identify what type of investor are you. I've learned that as medical professionals, we have a different mindset around investing. Some of them are looking for a lot of cash flow to cut back on their W-2. Others are looking for major tax breaks and tax strategies. Others are looking for that legacy. They've worked for the last 70 years or so, it feels like. And so they're looking for a property that will cover its expenses and they get to spend time with the grands. And so depending on the type of investor you are, we build out a very strategic step-by-step plan to help you to get there within 90 days. And then we help you to optimize it for the remaining of the year.
Thank you for sharing that. I love Kajabi because it's a lot of video-based courses. Are yours video-based as
Yes.
well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I love communicating via video. There's so much that can be communicated, not just with the words coming out of your mouth, but also how excited
Hmm.
you are and your facial expressions and all of the visual
Yeah.
aids. Yeah, it's wonderful. But of course, I'm an audio podcaster, so here I am. I guess I'm not really walking the walk by in the podcast realm, but when it comes to online courses, I'm very much a video-based course creator myself. All right, now, do you ever advertise your online courses in your podcast?
That's a great question. And that's something that I think I need to evaluate for 2025. Since our program, we're really specific about those who are joining us, and we want to support them in the best possible way to make sure that they're ready to go. We don't really advertise our program out there. We like to deliver a masterclass or a webinar that someone can join and really have a conversation and get their questions answered. And so every single podcast episode, we advertise our masterclass, our webinars to come into the room just to see if you're a good fit, see if we can actually help before you just go and try to buy something. So we don't want people to buy something. We want to make sure that they're the right fit for how we have structured our program. And they're ready, essentially.
I feel like you're using your podcast to kind of qualify your customer. Is that the right way to say it? You're making sure that they're in agreement with what you're saying on your podcast before they jump
Yeah.
over to your online course platform and buy something from you and learn from you to get into real estate. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, yeah, and there's even a layer in between as well. So the podcast, it's there to invite them to the webinar, to the masterclass. So they qualify them, then they get invited to the masterclass. So everyone can join that, but not everyone can actually purchase our course. Again, we want to be very mindful of everyone's journey and if they're really ready or if they should wait a little bit, and we're happy to have that conversation and be a part of their vision board. Maybe in 6 months, you're going to be ready and we're here to support you every step of the way. For me, it's a long game for me, Kim. I don't know about you. For me, the podcast is a long game. We have found that our sales cycle is actually about 8 months. I hope I'm okay with discussing that on here. So by the time someone meets me for the first time to the time like we're ready or they're ready to transact, it takes an average of 8 months. And so during those 8 months, they're searching for me, they're Googling me, they're trying to figure out, they're cyber stalking a little bit, trying to figure out, is her messaging going to change? Is she being truthful? Is she being authentic? And I think having the podcast, having the video version on YouTube as well, allows them to see my vibe. I'm a little bit quirky, I'm a little weird. I like lipstick, but I like spreadsheets. And, so they get to say, okay, do they really like me? And is my vibe off-putting or is it something that they can't handle for the next 90 days in their ear because I am who I am and this is what you get. I'm what you get. And so a lot of the moms in healthcare, they come to me, they say, you know what, you've helped me overcome some mommy guilt. I'm like, well, how so? So you just hearing the stories, they come back and it's just so refreshing. Some tell me straight up, they were really skeptical. They're really skeptical. This is real estate, right? It's going to bring in a lot of skepticism and things like that. And so they see that I have an evidence-based way of identifying markets, of identifying property. They see our guests that come on the show, they're providing value or providing their own stories, their own struggles, their own transformation. And so for me, it's a long game. I could see myself doing the podcasting for the rest of my life. Whenever I get off an episode, I feel like a pep in my step. I feel like, wow, I can do this. Like, can I just do this forever? I asked my team this. I was like, can I just do this forever? They're like, sure, but you got to get back to work. You got other things to handle as well. So I absolutely love it. And Kim, again, I feel like I didn't answer your question. I'm so sorry.
No, I think you did answer it. I really do.
Okay.
I think that what you did is you became a thought leader when it came to short-term rentals, right?
Yes.
And
Hmm.
also what you're saying is that you are building your audience, you're building relationships
Yes.
with them. You are giving them free samples of what you know. And by showing up every single week and being consistent about it, you now have a back catalog of information that they can peruse and educate themselves prior to them, like you said, showing up to a webinar even, or, then after that, buying into a program, a coaching situation. So, yeah, I think you answered my question. I can't even remember what the
Okay.
question was. But I think I asked, what do you talk about and what are you trying to
Yeah.
do? Why start your podcast? I think that was the original question. Why? What's your why? And I think you did a great job of explaining it. Podcasting's not perfect. I'm not afraid. I know you're not either, to just try something and
Yeah.
yeah, and just put it out there and let other people learn from it. And that's a big reason that I'm having this Pharmacist Podcasters Series. People need to see that it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the formula like you were talking about earlier. Like, we want the formula, but it's okay not to have the exact formula. Pick a starting point and just get 1% better every single time from there.
Yeah.
That's a great goal. I love that goal. Does your audience interact with you on any of the podcast platforms or, LinkedIn messages or whatever? How do you know who's actually listening? You said you want to reach people who are like you, the mom doctors, but who's actually reaching back out to you?
That's a great question. Okay, so let me explain to you a little bit about my workflow, and it's probably not proper, so feel free to feel free to let me
Keep it
know, Kim.
PG, but yeah, let me have it.
Oh, no, for sure, for sure. Yes, it's totally PG. So from not proper perspective is once every 2 weeks, I actually still go live. And I go live on a multi-platform distribution software called Restream. I go live on Facebook. I go live on LinkedIn. I try to go live on Instagram. Each live, Kim, there are technical issues galore.
I'm learning how
And
to
I
do
try to,
LinkedIn Live this week. I feel
oh,
you on
good.
on the technical glitches.
Yeah,
I didn't properly connect LinkedIn to Zoom live stream and I reaped the consequences. So back to you.
exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly. So still learning. We're still learning, right? Okay, so I go live on all those platforms. And that episode, now that you mentioned it, is still what we're repurposing for, and those are called Rachel's solo episodes. Okay, so those are the solo episodes. And then I have episodes like this with you on this platform called Squadcast. And I am interviewing guests with video. And so those are the episodes that happen in between. And so for every like 2 or 3 guest episodes, we sprinkle in one solo episode with me. Hopefully that makes sense. Because again, I want my audience to hear my voice. I want them to hear my step-by-step strategies, my exact processes and workflows for our rental properties. I will say on those live episodes, I have those live interactions. I still have those live interactions. And that's what I'm saying. Tell me if this is proper or not. But sometimes I have to adjust and make sure that I don't say, oh, hey, Kim just popped into the room. Hey, Kim, what's up, girl? What's up? My editor's like, she did it again, which doesn't lend well for a podcast episode. So I have to take a pause. If I'm going to welcome a few people into the room, say something like, oh, now I'd like to welcome a few people. So my editors know to cut that out because it's not going to be fun. I don't think for someone who's listening, it's like, hey, what room? Where was she? What is going on? So yeah, so that's like it's a little bit of a hot mess express right now, but now I have trained myself to allow there to be like 2 pockets where I'm welcoming people and I'm answering questions. And then we're actually thinking of repurposing one section. It was like, you know what? If you've seen us live, we've had like a group of questions that came in and I can just go through questions. We haven't figured it out yet. Kim, we're still trying to figure it out. But nevertheless, I do go live still and I do interact live with my audience, but I have to be extremely mindful so that when my editors get it, they can nicely cut and then I can start, the next segment in a way that's easy for them to cut or allow all the questions to populate at the end. and then I can answer them there. But that means ending the podcast in a way with what's called kind of an outro and say, okay, so thank you everyone for joining today's episode, that kind of thing at the end. So again, hot mess express, but we're out here doing the thing and still tweaking.
Well, it sounds like you do interact with your audience, so that's great. But how do you
Mhm.
know if they're the mom doctor avatar that you're trying to reach?
That's a great question. I don't always know, I feel like. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I do invite them to grab a free resource. I do not leave anyone empty handed. So at the end of my podcast episode, I tell them, and you know what? If I'm sharing 5 points, here are the 5 ways to do such and such. Here are the 5 ways I did such and such. Point number 3, where I shared how we evaluated the market. I actually have a free resource for you if you're wondering how I did it. It's 75 gems, my top 75 cities, and go to blah, blah, blah.com and grab it. And so every single episode, I make sure I plug in something. I wouldn't say every single episode. I try to keep one episode that I'm not telling them to give me their email. In other words, for those who aren't aware, that is my way of capturing emails to build out my email list is by giving them a valuable resource. And that resource is very valuable. I've had data miners work with me to create a list of my top 75 cities and with the highest profitability for rentals. And for someone who that's their mindset, they're like, oh yeah, I want that. And that's how I know they're my ideal avatar because they grab that. So one thing that we measure at the end of the episodes is how many emails that we captured, how many, responses that if we're having a retreat, we have luxury retreats as well. How many folks signed up to join me on the masterclass where I'm going to break down what will be accomplishing at the retreat. So those are some of the metrics. Outside of that, I look at comments, and outside of that, I look at guest reviews. Guest reviews. Did I say guest reviews? That's for my Airbnb properties, guys. I apologize. I look at podcast reviews to see if I can detect any type of feedback on who the audience is. But Kim, I would love some insights from you. If you have any pointers or tips, I am all ears, my friend.
Well, I have a compliment for you. I've listened to a number of your podcasts, both on the YouTube channel and then also through the podcast player. And I feel like you are talking to the mom doctor avatar. And I think, honestly, you could be talking to men too. I don't think that you are necessarily talking about things that only women would appreciate. I think men are
Mm-mm.
interested in renting properties and earning money too. But I just want you to
Mm-hmm.
know that I feel like you are talking to your ideal client avatar when you step up to the
Mm.
mic. So that's a compliment to you, but I think that's very on brand. If that's who you want to reach, I feel like you are talking to them. I was just curious if they ever show up and say, I'm a pharmacist mom too, and I want to, invest in real estate as well.
Oh, they do.
You've had that experience?
100%, 100%. I'm thinking of them right now. We have 538 members who have joined our programming. Lots of pharmacists, lots of mom. Lots of them have said they heard me on a podcast. A lot have heard me on my own podcast, but quite a few have heard me as a guest on other people's podcasts. So there's
Nice.
power with that too, Kims, which is awesome. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah, podcasting has power for sure, too. I mean, I brought you on here to inspire my audience to hear your story and
Yeah.
your why. Why'd you start your podcast and who do you think you're talking to and, who actually interacts with you? I think it's really inspiring for them to hear that, oh, yeah, well, when you act like you're talking to that person actually responds to you. I think it's very powerful when we talk about these things. When you are doing a podcast interview and you are talking about real estate, would you say that in general, you're always talking about the short term rentals and the mid-term rentals, I think you call it? Or do you sometimes go outside of that topic? I've only listened to, I think, 4 podcast episodes, 2 on YouTube and 2 on the podcast players. Do you stay pretty close to that line or do you go outside of it?
I think we're multi-talented people, right? We're not just pharmacists, we can do a lot of other things too. But in full transparency, I stay within those lines. I don't veer off from those lines. I feel like there was one day that I veered off And I paid the price, Kim. I paid the price. Our numbers dipped. I had a girlfriend come to talk about options trading. She used to work for Wall Street. I was like, that's interesting. That's cool. Come on over to the podcast. Let's talk about it. The people said no. The people said they did not come to hear about that. They said no. But I will tell you, the areas where I veer off a little bit is where I talk about some of the burnout that I experienced when I was working those jobs, the sacrifices that I had made, the struggles that I experienced. And if I bring on a guest that's going to provide us some tools for time management, some tools for self-care and self-reflection, those seem to do well. Okay. So, and I feel really good about those guests because it's in alignment of ultimately one of my mantras is let's help you to create a life that you don't need a vacation from. And that's part of the luxury rentals, the vacation rentals type of mantra. And so when I went just completely off topic, I paid the price and I paid it dearly. So I don't see myself doing that anytime soon. However, I do feel passionate about talking about those self-care things. And so in order for me to do that in a way that I think would work well is to kind of like bridge the gap, right? And make the connection between why I do midterm rentals. Midterm rentals is a sustainable strategy for self-care and it's less turnover and then, that kind of thing. So I would love your insights as well, Kim, in terms of like switching gears and like how jarring it would be for your audience if you start talking about crypto. Okay, today we're just going to talk about crypto out of nowhere.
I would possibly lose my audience. It's one thing to have that ideal listener avatar in mind and talk to them, step up and talk to them. But the what you talk about, if you step away from the punchline, basically, then yes, I think they do start wandering away. I do a number of different type of episodes, and I can tell there are a certain number of people who really like my drug pronunciation episodes. Oh my gosh, if I get the right drug name, thousands of downloads for this one episode, right? But then if I start talking about personal things, like I do a quarterly update, a seasonal update where I just talk about my family, my business, my podcast, and what I've been listening to, reading, watching, and playing. And there are some people that could not care less about my personal life, and I lose them. You know what I mean? So to answer your
Yeah.
question, I think if I stray too far from the punchline of what they really are showing up to hear, then they tune out. Much like you said right there when you were talking about, was it self-care or something in that one episode, or you invited a friend to talk
No,
about
it
something
was
else?
actually options
Yeah,
trading.
there you go.
Wall
Unrelated.
Street options trading. Like, I was like, oh, this is going to be a banger. This is interesting. She's from Wall Street. And they're like, no, we want nothing to do with this.
It's interesting how your audience will tell you what they want to hear by not showing up when you talk about something that's not what they want to hear. Yeah, it's a good point. Point well made, for sure.
Loud and clear. They were loud and clear.
Absolutely.
The silence was deafening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think when we look at our downloads, we can tell when people like something and when they don't. Again, I get thousands of downloads for certain types of episodes, and then like I'll get 38 for a certain one for the first day it comes out, and I'm like, ooh, that didn't do very good. I don't like looking at that.
That didn't land.
No, like the first day it comes out, and that's not a good number.
Yeah.
But you learn by trying things, and
Yeah.
you try to get 1% better every time. Well, we have covered a lot. Do you have time for just a few more questions?
I do.
Okay. Let me ask you, what's the number one thing you get out of podcasting?
For me, the number one thing I get out of podcasting is the ability and the knowing that I am amplifying my mission. My mission is to impact the financial position of over 1 million women in my lifetime. And what better way to do that than on a podcast? Every single download, I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to my mission. And so I get immense fulfillment knowing that I am just planting that little seed and giving them a resource, giving them a tool to really experience what financial freedom can look like, whether it's more family time that they can enjoy, self-care, all of those things so that they could practice pharmacy, healthcare on their own terms.
I love that. I love that you have a mission. I believe I read that in writing on your website. That is truly your mission and that you
Yep.
feel like you're making progress toward it. That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's an inspiration. I think it's important for my audience to know, anybody looking to start a podcast, that it's okay for there to be something in it for you. It's okay to do
hmm
it for a little bit of selfish reasons too. You're allowed to get something out of it too.
Yeah. And there's nothing quite like hearing a story. And I genuinely get more excited when a fellow pharmacist finds an amazing deal and has a success story or get a really nice booking. And there's so much fulfillment that comes from hearing that success story and seeing that, oh, wow, I had a little bit to do with that, just a little seed that was planted. And so it just reinforces what I do, even when sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, someone didn't upload something the right way or they didn't do this on time. But then I remember those little success stories. I said, you know what, we're going to put it out there anyway. That janky episode that kind of cut out at the wrong time, maybe the very thing. You just never know. Maybe the very thing that moves the needle for someone.
Yeah, you never know what the person listening needs to hear. And if you gave them that thing they needed to hear and somehow they communicate that to you, that puts gas in your tank. That makes you want to podcast more.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, there are many people out there, many pharmacist podcasters to be, maybe listening to this today. What advice do you have for pharmacists who want to start their own podcasts?
I think it's okay to start with guesting, to go on other people's podcast episode, to learn the experience is like, to speak clearly, to be consistent, to start to establish yourself out there. I think that's a great way to start. It's to start guesting for sure. And once you have identified who it is that you want to speak to, just start. Start with clarity, be clear. Don't worry about leaving a segment of the population out. I know a lot of people, they say to me, well, Rachel, you're talking about women in pharmacy, women in healthcare. What about the guys? That's fine too. Kim even mentioned it. She knows that the message that we're putting out there will land for them as well. However, there's so much power that comes with you speaking specifically and directly and with clarity to that niche target audience, because once they hear you, they're like, wow, she's talking to me. Because when you talk to everyone, I feel like you talk to no one. It's like, was that really for me? Nah, she must not be talking to me. But when you call them out by name and you say, Sophia Patel, you in the pharmacy, I got you covered, girl. They're going to hear you. So just be clear and give it a shot.
I love that encouragement. Thank you so much for the pep talk. And I got to get nerdy with you for a second here. If you could think of one tool or one piece of gear that you would recommend from everything you've ever owned in the last 5 years of podcasting, what would you recommend? What's like the number one thing, number one must have item?
I would say a good microphone. So I started off with a microphone called ATRX, is like $100. It was sufficient enough. You don't need the Mac Daddy $500, $1,000 microphone, but you need a good microphone. I love my camera now. I have a really good camera, but I just started with a webcam. Cameras are hit or miss, but when it comes to podcasting, the mic is everything.
Yes, I would not recommend talking directly into a computer or a laptop. Definitely not. Because people need to focus on what you're saying, not how you're saying it.
Mhm.
My opinion. I'm judgy. I'm an audio snob, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and it's jarring, right? If you hear something and it's like staticky, your audience is going to bounce off. And you did all that hard work to put something together for them, and they're not even going to listen because it doesn't sound right. So, yeah, invest in a mic, it's worth
Well
it.
said. Thank you for that advice. I like how you said that too. And as we start to
Mhm.
wrap this up, is there anything else coming up here in 2025 that you would like to promote? I know you talked about a lot of things, webinars and podcast episodes
Yeah.
weekly, and you've got lots more coming. What would you like to promote here in 2025?
Well, we just launched our 2025 list for the highest cities with the highest profitability for short and midterm rental. 75 gems is what we call it. So if the audience would love a free gift, go to 75gems.com. That's the number 7, the number 5, GEMS.com, and you'll grab that resource, and then we'll hook you up with all of our other goodies and webinars that are coming up.
Awesome. I can tell you like to gather and organize information and then share it with others. And yeah, that's kind of the lead into working with you. I think that's great. Yeah, you know how to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah. And we've been using a lot of AI lately as well to help gather a lot of those industry and market analysis research. So that's been really instrumental in the year of 2025 for us.
Way to embrace technology. I'm starting to get on the AI train myself. I might be getting the
Oh,
ChatGPT paid version pretty soon here. I feel like I've still got the
oh
training
yeah.
wheels, Rachel, but
Oh my
I'm making
gosh. We
progress.
got to do an episode. It's incredible.
Good for you embracing it. I love it. As we wrap this up, any last comments? Anything else you'd like to share?
I am just so grateful to be allowed to share what we're doing on our end with our audience. Just for the audience, guys, just start something. Do something for 2025 that your future self will thank you for. I truly believe that podcasting is the long game for sure. When it comes to podcasting, it really helps you to provide resources, tools, tips, and tricks to whoever you intend on serving. So start now, and whether it's once a month, once a quarter, once a month, and then you can build up and get 1% better every step of the way. That's the last thing I'd like to leave you with.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom and encouragement. I love it. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for being on the Pharmacist Podcasters Series here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Take care, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. That ends the interview, but here's the bonus. Rachel now talks about advertising your podcast. Take it away, Rachel.
One of the biggest ahas for me over the last couple of quarters is that just recording a podcast is not quite enough. The magic is in letting others know that you have a podcast episode that just published. So whether you are sharing a quick email and say, hey guys, I just had a great conversation with Kim, and we dissected the 3 tips to creating a podcast episode that's going to make an impact for our clinic or for our business or for whatever venture that we're or enterprise that we're a part of. Putting it out there into the world in like a bite-sized chunk or in a blog or a long form email or a LinkedIn post, that's where the magic happens, because no one's just going to go on, the podcast platform and say, hey, I wonder what Rachel's up to. That's not part of people's workflow. They're scrolling on social media, they're checking their email, they're looking at their text messaging. So think about where your ideal audience is looking, and have a plan. And it's not going to be hashed out from day one, right? But keep a plan in the back of your mind as to, okay, once the podcast launches, what is my plan for making sure that the word gets out so that my ideal audience knows, oh, a new episode is available, and then they'll go and listen to it.
All right. It sounds like you use newsletters, right?
Yep.
Social media.
Yep.
And give me 2 more. What are 2 other things you
Text
do?
messaging.
Really?
Yes.
I do not
Text
do that.
messaging.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah. We
your
say,
audience gives you their phone number and you have a way to text message them when a new episode drops?
yes, they'll get an episode, text message on Wednesday morning. Hey, new episode dropped at 9 a.m. And there's a link for them to just go on there. And that has impacted our downloads significantly.
Wow. What's the tool you use for the text messages?
That's a great question. I believe it's called Simple Text is a tool that we use. And Twillo, I think we're transitioning to Twillo because we're looking at our budget and the rates, right? So don't forget to look at your budget, guys.
Yeah, I always tell people budget and features. It's just like buying a car. You think, how much money
Yes.
do I have to spend? And what is it that I really need? Yep.
Yep.
And how about one more? One more way that you advertise: social media, newsletters, text, and what else?
Yeah, I mean, with social media, there's multiple ways, right? So we leverage LinkedIn, we leverage Instagram, we For the YouTube videos, you can actually publish it out to Pinterest. We publish it out to Pinterest. We publish it out to Facebook. We use Facebook. So social media, yes, but we put it out to as many platforms as possible. And you mentioned the email list is where the newsletters go out to as well.
Wow. Yeah, I'm learning things from you. I didn't know
Are
about the
you
text
really?
message thing. No, I didn't
Yeah.
know about that. So yes, I'm learning from you. This has been a great bonus. Thanks for hopping back on the call. Rachel, you take care. What a great bonus. I really appreciate Dr. Rachel talking about podcast advertising. I just learned something, especially about the texting. Who knew you could text people when a new podcast episode came out? That is the first time I had ever heard of that. Thank you so much to Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh for being my guest today. I love talking to pharmacist podcasters, and I hope that Dr. Rachel inspired you to look into starting your own podcast. Maybe you've been brought on stage on Clubhouse too to talk about something. Maybe people have told you, hey, you're a thought leader. Maybe that is a sign that you should be like Dr. Rachel and start a podcast too. Inspiration comes from various places, as you can tell. Some of my guests have found a gap and filled it with a podcast. Dr. Rachel found that she was a thought leader on Clubhouse. She took it to that Facebook platform and then she started her podcast, and she's focused on getting 1% better all the time. And if you can just go back and look at what she has done, she has definitely done that. She's on all the podcast players, she's on YouTube now. She's doing awesome. And I loved hearing that she has a team. You don't have to do it all yourself. That's important to know. I have done teaching locally, podcasting 101 classes, and I had a student once who practically left when he found out that you can hire a podcast editor to edit your podcast. You don't have to do it all yourself. If you need to hear that, if you need permission to have that team and not do everything yourself, permission granted. If you are interested in starting a podcast and you need help, go ahead and reach out to me through my business website, which is thepharmacistvoice.com. You can hit the contact form and leave me a message, or go to my online store, which is kimnewlove.com/podcasting, and look at my podcasting resources. I have a free ebook and audiobook about podcasting. I have a self-paced online course about podcasting, or you can sign up to work with me one-on-one by the hour. I love podcasting, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you to start thinking about planning your own podcast today. I don't talk about this much, but podcasting is a great way to ease into podcasting. If you have something to say, you're a thought leader, or people tell you that you're really knowledgeable about something, then if there is a podcast that talks about that, I would recommend that you pitch yourself to be a guest on that podcast. Reach out to the host, tell them how you can offer value to their audience, and maybe you'll make it on their show. Dr. Rachel told me about her podcast when we connected on LinkedIn, and that is how she got the invitation to be on this podcast today. I know that she already has a podcast and you may not, and you still want to be a guest on a podcast. Just do your research. Reach out to the host. You might make it onto that other podcast. And if you have something that you really want to talk about on my podcast, I do have a guest application form. There is a link to it in the show notes. Go ahead and fill that out, and I will be in touch. And speaking of the show notes, they are on thepharmacistvoice.com. That's pharmacist with an S, thepharmacistvoice.com. Click the podcast tab and then find episode 323. In the show notes today, you will find that guest application form link that I just mentioned, links to the Luxury Rental Doctor Show, Rachel's website, her LinkedIn profile, and the 75 Gems resource that she mentioned at the end of the interview. You'll also find my podcasting resources that I mentioned earlier, my social media links, and more. Always, there are so many links in my show notes. Please check them out. There might be something that you would be interested in following up on. Everything you need is on thepharmacistvoice.com. Find the show notes for episode 323. And if you know somebody who would like to invest in short term rentals or invite Dr. Rachel to be on their podcast, please share this episode with them. And if you like this podcast, come on back. We've got lots more planned in 2025. Subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Thank you so much for listening today. I will talk to you next week.